Hello everybody, my name's John Lacey and this is Coffee and Content, the weekly live stream about video, live streaming and content creation. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today we're talking all about OBS Studio and how to work with OBS Studio scenes. So this was a topic that we actually covered on the video and live streaming show recently with Sam Proof, but I really wanted to take the opportunity to sort of demonstrate how this works in the software a little bit more than just discussing it. So that's what we're going to do today. So we're going out live to all the various places. So I'd love to hear where you're watching from. So if you are watching live, let me know in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. And we'll get stuck into that in just a moment. But this is Coffee and Content. So we need some caffeine to get started. So let's take a sip. So I hope you've had a great week, and again, happy Easter to those that celebrate this weekend. It's actually a long weekend here in Australia, so I'm happy to have a couple of days off work as well, which has been really, really awesome. So today we're going to be talking all about scenes, and we'll talk briefly about scene collections because that is a worthwhile thing. But I really want to unpack how we can work with scenes in OBS Studio specifically. Just going to move this a little bit closer to my mouth. There we go. Okay, awesome. So today we're going to talk about scenes. So what are scenes? Scenes essentially are the building blocks of our presentations, whether we're doing them live or we're pre-recording. And let's just take a moment to think about some of the scenes that are involved in this particular show, Coffee and Content. So you'll see we've got a number of different scenes here, and they're all set up slightly differently. First of all, we've got the starting soon sequence, which again has the thumbnail for this show. It also has some music and some wave visualization there as well. We've actually got the scene that I affectionately refer to as the John Only scene. So that's just me in the middle of the screen. Sometimes I'll also have the chat there as well. I've got the ability to share the screen and myself, which is something that we do most weeks, and also the ability to share the screen without myself because sometimes I'm actually obscuring the thing I want to show you. And then finally, we have that thank you scene at the end, which essentially is identical to the first scene, but in this case, it just says thank you instead of starting soon. So a big hello to Walter Strong III, who's joining us today. So it's great to have your company, Walter. I hope you'll enjoy today's show. Again, if you've got any questions, let me know in the chat. But today we're talking all about OBS Studio and how to work with scenes. So we saw that there were a number of different scenes that go into this particular show. And I want to talk briefly about how we can work with scenes. But before we do that, let's head over. I'll actually share the software here. So this is OBS Studio. If you've not seen it before, I know it can be a little bit daunting for most people at first glance, but I want to sort of gently help you to check it out, and don't be scared of it. It may or may not be the right product for you if you are live streaming, but again, I think it's a great tool to have in the back pocket of your content creation toolkit. So first of all, I want to talk about scene collections. So up here, we've got the ability to work with different scene collections. And this essentially means we can set up different collections of scenes, as the name suggests. But it may be that you have some scenes for one podcast or show. You may have one for your day job. You may have one for your side hustle or project. you may have different ones for different projects and presentations. So this is a really great way that we can work with these here. At the moment in this version, you'll see I've only got one that's called Untitled, but we could certainly come in here and create a new one and just say demonstration, for example. And that would actually bring up my, my new scene collection, which is completely blank at the moment. From here, we can actually go between those just by selecting their names from the list. So that's really awesome. But we also have the ability to duplicate our scene collection. We can rename our scene collection, we can remove it, and we can actually export and import them as well. So that's really, really handy. Another good thing is the ability to check for missing files. So if you want to do a presentation, you just want to make sure that everything that's in your OBS project is sort of ready to go. So I personally use Google Drive to store a lot of my files, and I do need to be a little bit careful that the Google Drive application actually does load when the computer loads, because otherwise I won't be able to access some of the things that are in my scene. So we've got those, and it's really, really very easy to work with different scene collections. And again, one thing that I like to encourage people to do is to actually go and just create a new dummy scene collection and just play with all the tools that you have at your disposal. So that essentially is how we can work with scene collections. And again, today we're just we'll stick with this demonstration one because that's nice and easy to work with. Walter has a really great question, and I'll talk about that one in a second. And actually, I say that let's talk about it now. So Walter is asking, what do you believe are the 5 live streaming software in today's live streaming world? I'm assuming the word best is probably in there as well. So there's actually a number of different options out there, and again, it very much depends on your level of technical ability, but also there are a lot of different constraints to consider. So Restream is a great option. It has the Restream Studio, which you can broadcast from within the browser, but you can also use software like OBS Studio to actually broadcast out to different places. We've also got StreamYard, which is a very similar arrangement. It has the StreamYard software built into the browser. I know people love Ecamm. People really love Ecamm. The problem with Ecamm is it's Mac only, and I don't own a Mac, and I'm unlikely to get one anytime soon. So that's not really something I know a great deal about, but the people that use it do speak very highly of it. So if you want to check out Tanya Smith, Stream Like a Boss, Dr. Elo, there are all kinds of great people out there that can help you with that particular software. OBS Studio, obviously, is my personal favorite, which I use for some projects. Not everything, but certainly for this show, I do use that, and I do love it. It has have a little bit of a learning curve, but it's a really great way of, it's really powerful. So you can start quite simply, and you can sort of grow into it and keep going as you move forward. And I think from memory, that is probably only 4. There are many, many options out there. And again, I guess for me personally, I'm very much of the opinion that if you find something that works for you, you really need a really compelling reason to switch, because everything comes with a learning curve, and you just want to make sure that trade-off is actually there. So admittedly, there are only 4 there. There are lots of other options there, but again, I like to stick very, at the moment, and again, this might change in the future, but at the moment, I use a lot of OBS Studio and I use a lot of Restream. But again, there's plenty of things out there. So thank you for that question, Walter. I do appreciate that one. So this is Coffee and Content, and my name's John Lacey. Today we're talking all about scenes within OBS Studio. So we were just mentioning the ability to set up different scene collections. And now I want to talk about the scenes themselves. So basically, the way this works in OBS is that you'll have a scene, and within that scene, you'll have a collection of sources. And those sources can be almost anything that you can think of, really. So you can have things like your video camera, your audio, graphics, text, different colors, all kinds of different things. And today, for our purposes, we're probably going to focus predominantly on the scenes rather than the sources, but I do want to do a show about the sources in coming weeks. So if you've got questions about that specifically, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. So today we will need some sources to actually get started, though, and show you some of these things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the plus sign here in the sources dialog box. I'm going to find the image section here, and I'm going to call this one gradient background. Again, it's a really good idea to actually use names, meaningful names, when you create these things because you'll want to reference them later on. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to find my image file on my computer, and I might even just move that off the screen for a moment so I can just find this really quickly. Just one second. And again, it's funny because I do have this all set up in my own personal install of OBS, but for today's purposes, I need to just go and find these files again. So we've got the gradients. There we go. That one should work nicely. Okay. Oh. And my computer seems to be running a little bit slow, so we'll give that a moment to catch up, although it looks like it may have crashed on me. So that's always fun when you're doing a live presentation. A part of me thought maybe I should do this pre-recorded and just upload this as a YouTube video, and I may still do that, but we'll just open the software again and I'll try again. It's worth noting for the purposes of today's demonstration, I am running two versions of OBS, one that's actually broadcasting to you and one for demonstration purposes. So let me just see if I can find that image again, and we'll continue from here. It's just really it's just the way that things work out when you're doing a live presentation. Live happens, as we say, and you've just got to roll with it. Okay, cool. So here we go. So you've got this gradient, and this is just something I use in all my branding. I'm going to go and I'll add a few more images here. One that's my logo. And that one there will do nicely. And just the grey bar as well. Okay, that one will do. All right, brilliant. So again, I guess another thing to note about this is that the order of your sources will determine what's on top. So these images, they all have some version of transparency. What we really want to see in this case is the gradient background on the bottom, the grey bar underneath, and the logo on top. So to rearrange our scenes and sources, it actually works the same for both scenes and sources, but we can either click on the thing that we want to move and just drag it in the list and let it go, or we can use these these sort of up and down arrows here. So if I just move that one up, you'll see that the logo is on top. So there we go. We've got a very basic scene. And again, for today's purposes, it will be very, very basic. Ordinarily, you'd want to come in and add a microphone and add a video camera. And again, if you want to check out on the Learn Live Streaming YouTube channel, I've got some tutorials about that already, so you can check that out. So in terms of actually working with our scenes in OBS Studio, obviously when we created this, it created a new scene called Scene, which is fine, but it's not very descriptive. So we might want to think about actually right-clicking and going up to rename this one. And from here, we can literally just type in the box, and I might say, I don't know, scene 1 or intro sequence, whatever it happens to be. Again, for our purposes, it's fairly academic. But whatever you want to do, you can actually work with those scenes. So if you look at the scenes doc here, we've actually got the ability to add a new scene. We've got the ability to remove a scene. We've got the ability to actually apply filters to an entire scene. So filters in OBS can be all kinds of things. They can be visual, they can be audio, depending on the context. You know, even the fact that I've got my green screen chroma key enabled behind me is actually a filter in OBS, and you can do that on an individual source, but you can also do that on a scene. So that's worthwhile keeping in mind. And again, we've got the ability to move up, move down, and we can right click and see some of our other options here. So one of the other ones that's really useful isn't actually a button down the bottom, is the ability to duplicate a scene. So if you wanted to duplicate a scene, and again, if we go back here and we'll just reference the scenes in this particular program, you know, you'll see that the screen share, which is sort of the third scene in this sequence, and with me featured on the screen, and the fourth one there is essentially the same scene. I've just duplicated it and I've just hidden my camera in the fourth one. So again, often it's a good way of you know, giving yourself a little bit of flexibility in terms of what you're doing, but also, you know, if you're reusing the same sources on the same scene and you want them in basically the same place, set that up first and then duplicate it and work with that. So we can certainly do that by right clicking and go duplicate. And maybe this will be John's intro. I'm calling everything intro, which is not particularly useful, but like I say, today is very academic. So from here, we've got the two different scenes, and maybe in this case, I didn't want the grey bar here. I can actually come in and click the little eye icon to just hide that. Another thing you can do with sources, which is really, really useful, is you can actually, if you click on one of them, hold down the control key, you can actually select all of them. You can right click and you can go to group selected items, which is right at the... I'm talking and I'm not sharing my screen. Sorry about that. Let me do that again really quickly. So I'm just going to undo. So another thing that you can do with your sources, if these are related, in this case they certainly are, or certainly the logo and the grey bar are. So if I hold down the control key, I can select each one of those. I can right click and I can go up to group selected items. And I might just call this one logo and bar. And that way, they're grouped, so we can actually open or close that accordion, and we can move them behind, or we can move them in front. But we can also sort of change the visibility, toggle the visibility with that eye icon. So again, if I turn that one on and off, that can be a really useful thing to do. And especially if you're using the virtual camera feature of OBS Studio, and maybe you're in a Zoom meeting, and maybe you have a promotion that includes a graphic of your product and maybe a little bit of text and a URL or even a QR code. You can group those things together. You can set it up to toggle the visibility. You could even do that on a Stream Deck. I love my Stream Deck. I'm pretty sure Walter loves his Stream Deck as well. So I've got the extra large there and it's changed my life. And I'll talk about how we can actually switch to different scenes with OBS a little bit later on today as well. So that way we've got the ability to bring those together. But again, if you wanted to remove the scene, rename the scene, duplicate the scene, you've got all those options there. It's actually pretty easy to get that started. So it's probably worthwhile to go back and really think about what kind of scenes you'll need for your presentation. So maybe it is just you on the screen, but it's often a good idea to incorporate some other things. So maybe you move within the frame, maybe you go to one side, maybe you have some screen share things happening there. Maybe you have an image of a product or a service or a call out. I know Walter actually uses some sort of almost PowerPoint slide graphics in some of his live streams that I watched one of them this morning, my time. And that was really great. It's, there's all kinds of things that you can do in terms of actually making your stream more engaging. So keep those in mind. So this is Coffee and Content. My name's John Lacey. Today we're talking all about OBS scenes and how to use them. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But before we do, I need another sip of coffee. I should say too that somebody recently sort of dropped into my DMs and commented that I don't always look at the camera, and that is completely and utterly true. And I do have a teleprompter. I've actually got an external screen, and I'm trying to look at it more. But the reality is that I often have I'll have comments on one screen and a show run document on another, and the software I'm demonstrating. So please just bear with me if I look away from the camera for a little bit. So it's really, really, really worth keeping that in mind. And I don't think, I know there are AI tools, and I don't like talking about AI tools. They're like the bane of my existence. I know there are certain ones that will actually give the impression that you're looking at the camera 24/7. That can be a little bit creepy and weird. I don't think there's anything wrong with being human, and I am definitely human. So let's just leave that to one side. But again, I've got another great question from Walter. Really making me think today. I love it. So what are the 3 things you wish you knew before using OBS software? So it's interesting, and I've been using it for so long that I probably need to go back in time a little bit to try and remember what that person was like. So I think really... Number one, and this is something I try to tell everybody, is that yes, it does have all the features, all the functionality. It really is on par with real production software. And that can be really daunting for the beginner. So the thing I like to remind people and remind myself is that you don't need to be too elaborate when you first get started. So start simply, but the beauty of that is that it does give you the ability to grow into it further. So that's probably number one. Number two, is really just to keep it simple when you get started. Make sure you do think about your video and your audio very carefully. I'm going to do an entire show on audio because audio is it's a very particular thing in OBS Studio. You need to make sure that you're capturing your audio sources and you're putting them in the right scenes, and you're actually adjusting the options in the audio mixer. Again, that's a slightly more advanced topic, so I'll cover that another time. But I guess number three, and this is not just OBS, this is live streaming in general. The thing I didn't really appreciate as a complete beginner was that there was a bit of a lag between what I'm doing and when it reaches my audience. And when I first started, I would stop mid-sentence. Like I would stop the stream the moment I'd finished talking. And that entire sentence wouldn't reach my destination, and it would cut off in a really awkward place. And that's actually part of the reason why I have these starting and ending sequences. So I do have a little bit of a gap between me and the end or beginning of my show. And I recommend this to anybody. If just make sure you have something at the end, and it's probably just an image. Like it can be a static image. That's totally fine. It could be a video if you're a little bit more elaborate. But just something to give you a little bit of breathing room, and keep that in mind. So thank you, Walter. That's a great question. I really, really appreciate that. This is Coffee and Content. My name's John Lacey. Thank you for joining me today. So we're talking all about scenes in OBS Studio. And we can see, we've spoken briefly about how we can work with different scenes. And again, with our scene collections, this is a great opportunity to set up different projects for, different scene collections for different projects. In my regular install, I've got one for my day job. I've got one for this show. I've got one for guesting on other people's shows. I've got different presentations that I've built out here. And I think in some ways that's something that I don't think a lot of people appreciate, is that it's a different mindset to go in and set up a bunch of scenes and do a presentation live, as opposed to recording different pieces of things and editing them in software. And both are perfectly fine. And I love doing both. I highly recommend it. A lot of people don't like editing. And for those people, I sort of say, if you can do something live in one take, why not give it a go and see if it'll work for you? So that is another way of thinking. But certainly we have the ability to duplicate. So again, if you want to maybe change some things about your scene collection, but keep the original intact, you can do that. You can actually export it. So if you want to move it to another computer, or even just have a backup, that's really, really useful as well. And you can import it when you're ready on the new device or new install, and you can check for those missing files. So again, and I'm just going to check my notes on this really quickly. In fact, what I'll do, I'll bring this over here where you can see it. If you head over to johnlacey.com, you can check out this article that I've written about today's subject. And this is kind of what I'm referring to as I go through this. So we've certainly looked at creating a new scene. We've looked at renaming a scene, duplicating an existing scene, removing a scene. So the next thing I want to talk about is actually rearranging the scene. So it depends a little bit on how you want to run your show, but certainly for this show, I have a very specific order in which I use them, and I like my first scene to be the first in the list. And again, it's so easy in OBS Studio. You can either click on the one that you want to move and drag it into position and let it go, or you can actually use these arrows to move up and down. And again, if I go back to this graphic, you'll see that I've got these in this order on my in my software, but I've also got them on my Stream Deck in this sequence as well. So this is a really useful way of me to actually go through the different scenes and bring those in. Another thing I'll just mention really briefly, and it is a little bit nerdy, but I absolutely love this, is that on my starting sequence and my ending sequence, I actually use a Rodecaster Pro, which is sort of an audio input device, which has a whole bunch of different inputs. And I use the ASIO plugin, which lets me bring in each of those inputs into OBS as its own separate audio source. So if I'm a little stressed when the starting soon sequence is on and I'm muttering to myself, my microphone isn't going out live on that scene. And I've got to tell you, that in itself is worth its weight in gold. So that's a little bit more technical, because normally I think in a lot of other applications, what would happen is you just get a single stereo track out of the Rodecaster and everything would go out unless you've adjusted the faders on the physical unit. And it's sort of given me the ability to work with that in the software, which I really, really love. So that's another way of working with those. So let's talk about actually switching between different scenes. So there are a few different ways of doing this. And let's just come over here. The most simple is to find your scene in the list and actually, in fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add another source in here really, really quickly, just a text source. And I'm going to say second scene. And we'll just call this second scene. And I just really want to make it, and again, for our purposes today, it's very, very basic. Another thing I'll mention too while I'm in here is if you want to make sure that you don't accidentally move some of these things around, you do have the ability to lock these as well. So if I lock everything except the second scene, this will be the only thing that I can rearrange. So I can sort of move it into position. You'll see that it's telling me how wide it is from the sides. If I right click, I can actually go to transform, and we have the ability to center to screen or center vertically. Control D is actually the shortcut for centering to screen. So I can do that and that'll happen automatically. And again, I'm gonna, in fact, what I might even do, I'll just come in here, I'll add a little bit more text and we'll say first scene. And again, this is only for our demonstration purposes today. I realize this is not very exciting, but I just want to make it really obvious which scene we're working with at any given time. And I'll go Control D to center that one. All right, cool. So we've got our different scenes here. Scene 1, first scene, second scene. And again, if you were building this out for a real project, it'd be a little bit more elaborate. It'd be like the presentation I'm giving now in OBS rather than the one I'm screen sharing in OBS, if you know what I mean. So there are a few different ways, and I guess the most simple way is just to click on the scene in the list that you want to switch to. You do actually have the ability to change the transitions here, and I might just gonna hide myself from this view. So we've actually got the scene transitions. We've got cut and fade as some default options, and if I change that one, you'll see that the way that we go. See, the cut just takes you straight to it, but if I've got the fade on, it's a little bit more subtle, and they sort of blur into each other. And there are actually other ways that we can bring in more plugins and change how that works. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is actually a little thing we call studio mode. And again, I'll just move myself out of the screen because this is over here in the controls. So we've got this thing called studio mode, and basically from here, we've got, on the left-hand side, we've got the preview of a scene, and we've actually got the program. So the program will be what is being recorded or what is going out live, depending on what you're doing. And basically, the nice thing about this is that if I go, maybe, I'm just going to click on this transition button. So at the moment, it's going first scene, and that's what's going out live. And maybe I'm looking at this and I'm going, oh no, there's a problem with scene 2. Maybe I haven't cropped myself out. Maybe my green screen isn't working. Maybe this text is wrong. So you can just imagine if you were interviewing somebody and you had somebody else's name here and you go, oh no, I've got to change this. So I can change this. I'll go corrected text, just as an example. And that way we can make changes to that without them being live. And they won't be live until I hit that transition button. Again, we've actually got quick transitions, so we can decide if we want to fade it or if we want to cut to it. And that's another way of actually working with the different scenes. And that way we can make changes to those scenes without actually showing all those things live, which can be a really handy thing to do. So you've got the ability to work with your studio mode, and again, you would just literally select the scene over here that you want to switch to, and when you're ready, you can either use a quick transition or you can transition it from here. I'm going to turn studio mode off over here. And again, we'll go back to that view where we can just see one scene at a time. This is actually the way that I prefer to work for the most part. I just want to make sure that I just have the scenes ready to go. It is worthwhile to go through your scenes just before you go live, and that's certainly something I've done today. It's a good thing to keep in mind. So there are a few other things that we can do though in terms of switching to scenes, and one of them, which I've mentioned already, is the Stream Deck. And this is such a beautiful device. You can program your Elgato Stream Deck to do all kinds of things on your computer. It's a really amazing productivity tool. I just want to show you how we can work with, in fact, not that one. So the Stream Deck. So this is actually a screenshot of the software that comes with the Stream Deck. Here you'll see that we have a category for OBS Studio specifically. And if you go into that list and find the scene option, you can drag that onto an empty spot onto your Stream Deck, and then you can give it some text, and you can actually choose which scene you'd like to switch to. If you have studio mode on, you'll actually have this second option, which will basically say send this to preview or to program. So that's another way of working. And you even have the ability to create a Stream Deck button that will toggle the studio mode being on or off. So again, if that's something you'd like to use and you want to switch to it often, all you need to do is find that studio mode button from the list in OBS, drag it onto your onto an empty spot on your Stream Deck, and you can change the title if you want to. You can also update the icons for these things if you're so inclined. I must admit, I never really get around to actually doing that, but it's good to know that that is indeed an option. So that's another way of working. And once you've got your scenes set up and they're only a button press away, that's really, really awesome. So in this case, I've just switched back to my screen share scene. And I want to show you a third way of actually negotiating these different scenes. And that's actually, if we go up to File, we go to our settings, we can actually set up some keyboard shortcuts for these things as well. So in your OBS settings, go to Hotkeys. And there's hotkeys for everything under the sun, but if we go up to the filter, we can actually search for scene specifically. And we've got these options here. So I've got two scenes in this scene collection, intro and John's intro. And if I want to switch between them and create a keyboard shortcut for this, I can click into this text box. I can go Control Shift P, for example. I don't know. Again, you probably need to be a little bit mindful of what keyboard shortcuts are being used by other pieces of software on your computer. But certainly you could figure that out and you could do that. So again, I could set that up. I could go Apply and go OK. And then I should be able to switch between those with my keyboard. So that's certainly another way of doing that. So again, you know, it's a good idea to actually think about what you're going to present in your scenes, what you want to talk about, whether you're sharing graphics or text, or even your screen itself or other media. Think about where you're going to be. I highly recommend, if you're doing anything live, to have some sort of intro and outro sequence, whatever that might look like for you. And, you know, you do have unlimited creative possibilities in that regard, but it's always a really good way to just give you a little bit of space between the start and the end of your presentation. Because like I said, when I was a complete beginner, I would stop the minute I stopped speaking, and it would just cut off mid-sentence. So that's such a rookie mistake, and fortunately one that I've sort of moved beyond. But again, I like to tell people that one because that's one I fell for. And Walter is saying that using the Stream Deck is a game changer doing live stream shows. It really is. Like, it's extraordinary how useful this bit of equipment is. I actually started with the Stream Deck Mini, which I think has 6 buttons, and I've still got it somewhere. I don't have it handy to show you, but I loved it. But I sort of felt, you know, if I had more buttons, I'd be able to do more things. And I did get the extra large, which I honestly have no regrets about. Elgato actually have a whole heap of different variations on this product, and there things you can do with foot pedals. There are things that you can do with knobs and sliders and touch screens. I'm really, really happy with the extra large. I just love all the buttons and my ability. Even though I'm not really using all the buttons on any of my screens, I love the fact that I can space them out a little bit more. And that's worked really, really well for me. It's great for streaming, but it's great for all kinds of things. If you've got text responses, you know, even just the ability to say kind regards, John, I've got a button for that. And that's probably saved me years of my life at this point in time. But, you know, whether you're working with spreadsheets, you know, whether you're switching between things on your computer, the possibilities are endless. And if you go and check out the video and live streaming show, we have done an entire show on the Elgato Stream Deck itself, so that might be worth checking out. So thank you for joining me today. We've actually gone a little bit longer than usual, which is nice. But I just really wanted to unpack some of the things that you want to think about in terms of creating your scenes. And again, I hope it hasn't been too daunting, because I think a lot of people are scared by the big black box that is OBS Studio. And it's kind of my mission in life to make it a little bit more accessible to the average person. So if you want to, you can head over to johnlacey.com. You can check out that article that relates to today's stream, but there's all kinds of content on there as well. I'd love for you to head over there and check that out. So that would be wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've learnt something along the way. Have a great weekend. For those celebrating Easter, have a great Easter as well. And I'll talk to you again soon. So take care, and thanks for joining me.